It was 3 a.m. in Caracas. The city hadn't fully woken up yet, but the sky had. A chain of blasts rolled across residential neighborhoods, flashes lit up near military facilities, and the electricity flickered in a few districts. People didn't hear the loudspeakers of a familiar Latin American coup. They heard something worse: silence, broken by the scream of jets, and the sickening sense that something impossible had just happened for real. A few hours later, on the other side of the planet, Donald Trump appeared with a short statement powerful enough to jolt the world. Nicolas Maduro had been captured by US forces and taken out of Venezuela. Not overthrown by his own military, not arrested by a domestic political rival. Removed from his own territory like a piece of cargo. If you wanted a cinematic moment to open a new chapter of the 21st century, one in which a superpower's hard power steps across every boundary, this was it. But this story isn't only about Trump scoring big, it raises a harder question. How can an action that looks like an absolute win for Trump turn into a strategic loss for the United States? And loss here doesn't mean something you see in a day or two. It's the slow kind, the kind that erodes legitimacy, cracks alliances, triggers chain reactions across Latin America, and sets a precedent Washington itself won't like when others start copying it. To understand the shock of January 3, 2026, you have to rewind more than a decade. Maduro didn't appear out of nowhere. He is a direct product of Chavismo, of Hugo Chavez, of an era when oil was turned into national identity and a political weapon. In the eyes of supporters, Maduro is the heir to the Bolivarian Revolution, the man resisting outside imposition. In the eyes of opponents, he is the face of a regime that clings to power through contested elections, security repression, and economic management that pushed an oil-rich country into crisis. In Washington's eyes across multiple administrations, Maduro was the problem, from allegations involving drugs and corruption to the wider story of migration and regional instability. For years, the United States tried everything except one thing: testing the idea of arresting a sitting head of state on his own soil. Washington imposed sanctions, tightened diplomatic isolation, recognized the opposition, and waited for the regime to collapse under its own weight. But Maduro didn't collapse. He survived through networks of loyalty inside the military, control of institutions, oil revenues even under pressure, and a simple reality of Venezuelan politics: the opposition was often as fragmented as the government. That endurance made Maduro the especially irritating kind of figure for planners in Washington, someone you dislike but can't finish with the usual tools. Then came Trump, a president drawn to decisive strikes, drawn to the moment of "I did what others wouldn't dare." In Trump's political logic, capturing Maduro wasn't just a security action. It was a symbol. It told American voters, "I'm tough on narco crime." It told opponents, "I'll go bold." It told the world, America is back, America as raw strength. And above all, it delivered an instant media victory, the image of capturing a dictator, crushing a regime, liberating Venezuela. Emotionally, it was the perfect gift for a political system that lives on moments and headlines. But in that very moment, a second question began running in parallel in the minds of diplomats and security officials. And then what? Because Venezuela is not a tidy room where you remove one person and everything falls neatly into place. Venezuela is a layered power system: the military, intelligence services, armed groups, underground economic networks, and a society worn down by scarcity, inflation, and years of mass emigration. If Maduro is removed, the vacuum can open faster than any transition plan can keep up. Look at the first hours of reaction. Venezuelan authorities said Maduro had gone missing, demanded proof he was alive, and called it an invasion. Calls for resistance appeared. Countries in the region condemned the action and demanded emergency meetings. International organizations were pulled in. Some viewed it as a blatant rupture of international law. And even among countries that had long disliked Maduro, many were still forced to ask, if the United States can do this in Caracas today, what could it do somewhere else tomorrow? That's the first hinge point in the idea of a win for Trump. A loss for America. Trump needs an immediate victory. The United States needs a long-term outcome that actually benefits it. Those two goals don't always align. Trump can stand in front of cameras and say, "We removed the dictator," but America has to live with the precedent. Washington just showed the world it is willing to cross borders and seize another country's leader by force. In international politics, precedent is like a crack in glass. At first, it's just a thin line. But every time temperature shifts, every time pressure hits, the crack spreads. The United States relies heavily on something invisible but extremely valuable: legitimacy. America calls for rules, a rules-based order, respect for sovereignty, dispute resolution through norms. When it breaks those norms itself, rivals won't waste the opportunity. Russia will say, "And you still lecture anyone about sovereignty?" China will say, "This is proof of interventionism," and smaller countries will hear a chilling message: rules exist only until a superpower decides to break them. From here comes the second risk: chain reactions across Latin America. The region carries a long collective memory of Washington getting involved, coups, interventions, backing one faction against another. Even when circumstances differ from case to case, the emotional residue is similar: deep suspicion of the hand from the north. So even governments that dislike Maduro may be pressured by their own publics to speak against the US to avoid being seen as puppets. New left-wing movements will gain a perfect story to tell. See? America hasn't changed. The US may have captured one man, but it could be handing ideological opponents an enormous fuel supply for propaganda for years. Then comes the third risk: what happens to Venezuela after Maduro? There's a very American illusion born from movies and speeches that if you remove the bad guy, society naturally snaps back onto the right track. Reality is usually harsher. When a personalized power structure is cut off at the top, what remains either hardens into a tighter block of repression or explodes into internal competition. In both cases, ordinary people pay first. If Caracas falls into chaos, migration could spike again. And who feels that pressure first? Not Europe, not Asia, neighboring countries, and eventually the United States itself, through its southern border. This is the paradox. Trump can sell the operation as protecting America, reducing drugs, reducing instability. But if Venezuela enters a new spiral, the US could face larger migration flows, greater oil market volatility, and deeper regional hostility. It's like trying to put out a fire with gasoline. It flares brightly for a few seconds. It looks like you did something, but then you're left with a bigger blaze that's harder to control. The fourth risk is asymmetric retaliation. Venezuela cannot fight the US head-on, but the modern world offers many other ways to hurt a superpower: cyber operations, terrorism, hostage-taking, attacking economic interests in third countries, or deepening partnerships with America's rivals to apply pressure. Even if Venezuela's central authority is weakened, loyalist networks, smuggling systems, or local armed factions can still act. In geopolitics, the worst case is often not a large war, it's a chain of smaller incidents, drawn out, exhausting, hard to attribute erosion warfare that drains public trust and national budgets. And the fifth risk, perhaps the deepest, is the impact on American democracy itself. A cross-border military operation to seize another country's head of state is the kind of action that can split US society sharply. One side will call it strong, finally, someone did it. The other will call it reckless, a violation of international law, a step toward an unnecessary crisis. This divide isn't only moral debate. It's a power question. How far can a president go unilaterally? Where is Congress? Where are allies, and who pays the price if everything goes wrong? Now lay everything on the table and look clearly at the win for Trump. On a personal political level, Trump gets several near-perfect advantages. First, he creates an image of instant decisiveness that dominates the news cycle. Second, he sends a deterrent message to rivals not only in Caracas, but everywhere. I'll go all the way. Third, he can link the operation to domestic themes of drugs, transnational crime, and border security. Fourth, he compresses a complex story into a simple one. Capture the bad guy, bring him to trial. But a loss for America begins precisely where that simplicity impoverishes strategic capacity. Strategy doesn't live on moments. Strategy lives on anticipating reactions, managing consequences, and sustaining alliances. If the world starts viewing the US as a country willing to act unilaterally despite norms, allies will grow cautious. They may still need America, but they will also hedge against America. And when allies hedge, your power declines in a way you don't notice immediately, like a machine still running, but losing a little energy every time it starts. In Europe, many governments' natural reflex is to worrying about precedent. They may dislike Maduro, but they fear a world in which state abduction becomes a policy tool. In Latin America, the fear is more historical. Is this the opening of a new era of intervention? At the United Nations, the focus will tighten around legality. And among major powers, this is a gift to the argument that America is hypocritical, a propaganda weapon rivals can use to recruit partners. There's another detail worth noting. When you seize a head of state, you don't just seize an individual, you seize a symbol. And symbols can outlive people. If Maduro is taken abroad, he can become a martyr figure for part of the population and loyalist forces. You may want to kill a myth, but you may end up creating a new one, the myth of the leader snatched away by a superpower. In political history, such myths can feed violence, resentment, and long cycles of retaliation. And what about oil? Venezuela sits on one of the largest oil reserves in the world. Any turbulence, their mixed markets hypersensitive. Even a rise in expectations of instability can move prices. And if energy prices swing, major economies feel it. This is the domino effect. A raid in Caracas can translate into inflation pressure elsewhere. America may say it acted to protect interests, but the world will ask, whose interests and who pays? The irony is that a win for Trump does not necessarily mean a win for America, even if everything goes according to the short-term plan. Suppose Maduro is indeed detained, tried, and Venezuela quickly transitions to a more US-friendly leadership. Even that best-case scenario leaves a scar, the method. In international politics, method matters almost as much as outcome because it creates the norm for next time. After World War II, America built power through alliances and rules. If the US returns to might makes right, those networks will weaken over time. So why would Trump do it anyway? Because domestic political logic often beats long-term strategic logic. For a president, especially one driven by media instincts, the reward of a bold action arrives immediately. Approval ratings, headlines, the feeling of control. The cost alienating allies, setting a dangerous precedent, triggering regional backlash arrives later, in fragments, and is hard to tie directly to the original decision. That's why decisions that are good politics can be bad strategy. While the smoke over Caracas hasn't even cleared, the biggest question isn't was Maduro captured? But what kind of superpower does America want to be? A superpower of rules, sometimes slow and frustrating, or a superpower of raids, where the strong write the rules as needed? The answer won't be found in a press conference. It will be found in the months that follow. Can the US build a stable pathway for Venezuela, keep alliances intact, avoid spirals of retaliation, and control the migration shock? And that's how this story closes, on an image that is just as cinematic, but colder. Not the helicopter leaving Caracas, but capitals around the world sitting down and remembering one thing: a boundary has been pushed. Once a boundary is pushed, it becomes easier to push it again. Today, it's Venezuela. Tomorrow, it could be somewhere else. In that world, Trump may win a political hand, but America risks losing part of the order it once built. the very order that made it strong in the most durable way. You might experience this story like an intense political thriller episode, but for small countries, it is a survival signal. And for the United States, it is a stress test. Real strength isn't only the ability to capture one man. Real strength is the ability to do it without destroying what makes others trust you. When you win by making the world afraid, you can win fast. But you can also start losing from the moment the applause hasn't even faded.